Hello, my name is Nancy, and this is Maplewood Homestead. It is an absolutely gorgeous fall day, and honestly, I probably should be out in the garden getting it ready for the winter. However, there was something I wanted to talk to you about. When we first started on this journey, we were interested in homesteading, and we started watching a lot of content creators on YouTube, and it just made us more and more interested as we watched them on their journeys. Eventually, that led to us getting the idea that this is something we wanted for our family and for our lives as well. Soon after that, I started to accumulate some books that helped educate me a little bit more, and my husband as well, as we started making some choices about where we should go, how we should even start on this whole endeavor. So today, what I wanted to share with you was some of the books that we have in our library that I highly recommend that have been super helpful over the last 6 years that we've lived here. So let's get started. So the first book I want to tell you about is one that was recommended to me. It's called The Encyclopedia of Country Living, and it's written by Carla Emery. This was written back, I want to say the 1970s, so it is decades old. And actually, if you see this, it's the 40th anniversary edition. They've actually come out with the 50th anniversary edition. That's how long I've had this book. In any case, this book goes over a lot of essentials for living off-grid, but you don't need to have a plan for living off-grid for this to be of value to you. This book covers everything from if you're going to find raw land, what to look for. If you wanted to build your own structures, how you would do that. It talks about specific plants. It's like a gardening book within it. It talks about specific vegetables, herbs, how to grow them together, how to preserve them, canning, dehydrating. It talks about growing hay, collecting hay, storing hay. This book is phenomenal. It is very detailed and very much worth every penny that you're going to spend on it. So I highly recommend this for anyone who wants to homestead, period, who wants to do something maybe a little bit more than chickens in a garden, which I consider homesteading. Definitely a worthwhile investment. So again, this was the first book that I owned. And you can even almost stop there if you wanted to. However, another book that I just recently picked up that is along the same lines, it's not specific to an area of homesteading, but an overall general book that talks about many different things, is The Independent Farmstead, written by Shawn and Beth Dougherty. Now, what they're doing here is something that we're looking to do on our homestead from here on in. The subtitle to this is Growing Soil, Biodiversity, and Nutrient-Dense Food with Grass-Fed Animals and Intensive Pasture Management. Now, that's a mouthful, but the content of this, even though it's thinner, is chock full of things. Now, there's areas that it doesn't go in, that it does not go into, that the Encyclopedia does, but they too talk about how to look at your land and determine if it's good land or if it's not good land for animals that you want to raise. Talks about foraging specifically, talks about how to get water to your animals, raising livestock, housing livestock. It doesn't really talk about gardening per se, the way that the other book does. However, it does talk about raising fodder for their animals. What really impresses me about the Doughertys is they raise at least 90% of what they feed their animals on their property. I'm really feeling like that's a direction I would like to go. My husband would love it if I could figure out how to feed all the animals and stuff we grow here. And we need to do a much better job of pasture management. So one of our goals together, we're working on this, is pasture rotation, getting our livestock out there. And as we add animals, what does that look like? I highly recommend this if you are considering raising livestock and want to do rotational grazing. This is definitely a very good book. What makes this book even more special for me is I got it autographed. Oh, no, seriously. I feel very privileged that I got to actually have some conversations with them specifically about this and raising food for their own animals. So it's The Independent Farmstead. Okay, so now on to some more specific books. I have a gardening book that I really like that I used often at the beginning. My son, my teenager, thankfully hijacked it because he was doing his own schooling of sorts. He was educating himself on growing herbs. It was something he became very interested in. So I don't have that book with me. I guess I'll have to do this again when I find that book, right? But I do have this. And when we first moved onto our property, I was very much interested in all of the flora that was around here. I was like, there is so much here. What can I use? What can I forage? I mean, if it's there and it's edible, why not use it? I got one of the areas specifically I was interested in as far as foraging was learning how to create medicine with herbs. This is called Backyard Medicine, Harvest and Make Your Own Herbal Remedies by Julie Barton, Bruton-Seal, and Matthew Seal. My son also had hijacked this, but I got it back from him. And what I really like about this book and has been very helpful to me is it actually has like color photographs of the leaves, the fruit, and the flowers of each of the plants that I can find around my property. I also like the fact that it gives you a description, the habitat, where you can find it, related species, and the parts that you can use. Also, it gives you ways to use it. It gives you recipes. For instance, this is for chickweed. It tells you how to make chickweed pesto, have a chickweed bath if you have itchy skin, and chickweed bath vinegar. I actually used this to identify my jewelweed and the plantain, and we've actually added salves to our product line for our soap company. We have a soap company called Sentinel Soap. So you can find my salves that I foraged for the ingredients for here on our property, thanks to this book and thanks to my son's curiosity in how to use herbs. So, and how to forage. So this is another book I really, really, really like. Along that lines, when you do grow your garden and you have all that produce, I know there are tons and tons and tons of great preservation books out there. How to can, how to dehydrate, how to freeze dry, I'm sure. However, right now, all we do is can and dehydrate. When I started learning, like a lot of people, I was kind of nervous about any of the books. I wound up getting the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning. I know, it's not fancy or colorful or flashy, but I'll tell you what, this book takes you through every minute detail. I mean, they just assume you know absolutely nothing. And I appreciate that because sometimes that's what I need. But I actually use this book because every fall I offer a class in canning for anyone in the community that wants to come. And as you can see, I've done my outline completely based on information that I've got from this book. Yeah, it is very detail oriented. Like I said, it has recipes for both fruits, making jams, jellies, vegetables. It does even talk about canning soups, canning meats, and canning broth. So, which is something I do. So I highly recommend this for canning purposes if you're a little nervous about canning, because I know some people can be. So there's that. Continuing on the thought of food, because we have dairy goats, we always have way more milk than we need. And one of my besties, Miss Carrie, had dairy goats before me, and she had this book and she highly recommended it. So thank you, Carrie. I use this book all the time. All the time. You've got the typical farmer's cheese in here, but you also have things like cottage cheese. You've got provolone, mozzarella. There's so many different recipes in here. And what I really like is I've used it a lot. The print is really big, really easy directions to follow. You can't really mess it up. I mean, I probably have, but it's super, super straightforward is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, really, really, really like this book. They make it really easy. So, and the other thing that I really liked about this book is that when you go onto the Facebook pages about, you know, things, cheese making or goat milk groupies or whatever, a lot of people actually recommended this book. So that gave me even more confidence about using it. I mean, I had it already from making it myself, but I was like, hey, I have that book. So highly recommend Home Cheese Making by Ricki Carroll. Okay. As far as livestock specific, two books that I want to recommend that I've used off and on. And I haven't read them cover to cover, but they have served as reference books for me. The first one I got because in our area, somehow we've become known as the chicken people. And people will come and bring their problem chickens to me or call me about, hey, this is going on with my chicken. And a lot of times I only know because I've been through it with my chickens. And if I haven't been through it with my chickens, I really sometimes felt at a loss of what to say. I could guess, but this book is called The Chicken Health Handbook, a complete guide to maximizing flock health and dealing with disease. And it's written by Gail Damerow. It is a very good book. It goes over all the basics of keeping chickens, which you may or may not already know, but if you're just starting out, this is a perfect book to get. What I really get a lot out of is they have a chapter on viruses, specific protozoa, another chapter on protozoa that affects chickens, and another one on how bacteria affects chickens. But the most helpful thing, not just for myself, but when people come to us, is it has a diagnostic guide. And so this diagnostic guide, it has the symptoms, how to take blood from them. It has what to observe, signs of health and illness. But it has a checklist. Let me show you. It has a checklist of what to look for and to help determine what is going on with your chicken. I really like that. And the last thing I really like about this, oh, look, it tells you the internal organs of the chicken. So if you had to do a necropsy to find out what's going on, you can see what looks normal, what doesn't. But the thing that I really like about this is it has treatments and therapies for your chicken. So not only can you tell what's going on, but how you can treat it. And the last book that I want to tell you about is called Goat Husbandry by David Mackenzie. And much like the very first book I showed you, this is a very old book. It's from the 1970s, and it's been updated just like that first book I showed you. It was recommended to me by a woman who I met who has kept goats in Australia for the last 30 years. And while Australia and the United States are not quite the same, she was very knowledgeable about goats, and we've had some really good conversations, and she just recommended I get this. I think the one part of this, actually there's two parts of this book that I got a lot out of. One was reading about their dietary needs and how to meet those. There we go. How to meet their dietary needs, understanding how their body interacts with the food that they eat, how they process it. It has a section on how to select breeding stock. It has a section on how to age and select a goat. But something that I really like that, of course, anybody who has dairy goats, excuse me, or goats, that kid need to always have illustrations of what to do when things don't go the way they're supposed to. So anyway, that's the last book that I have. And that pretty much is my go-to books in our library. The reason I even did this video was because Jess Soward over at Roots and Refuge, she actually put out a charge to other content creators like myself, those who homestead and who have used actual physical books in helping them to take care of their homestead. The reason for this is, and I don't know if you might even be aware, is with the advancement of AI, they're using it to create homestead books, but nobody's checking how valid they are. You know, like the books that I've had that are 40 or 50 years old, guess what? They would have been pulled from the shelves a long time ago if they contained really bad information. Well, we're not at that place. So beware of some of the newer books. And I know that Roots and Refuge is putting together a playlist of other homesteaders like myself who want to give you advice as to books that we've used that might help you. So I hope you take advantage of that. I hope this has been of some help to you. And if it has, can you please consider subscribing to our channel and looking for more content from us in the near future. Thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you soon.